Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a story that starts with a protest in a church, but quickly spirals into something much, much bigger. We're talking religious freedom, media personalities, and yeah, even one of the biggest pop stars on the entire planet. So let's unpack this.
It all exploded with just 3 words. The world is watching. But here's the thing. That quote didn't come from a politician or some cable news pundit. It came from superstar Nicki Minaj. So what on earth would make her weigh in on something like this? Well, to get that, we have to go back to the tense confrontation that started it all.
Okay, Section 1, the flashpoint. It all kicks off with this incredibly tense moment that erupts right in the middle of a worship service in a Minneapolis church.
So what you're seeing in the source footage is a group of anti-ICE protesters walking right into the church while a service is happening. And they're not alone. They're with former CNN anchor Don Lemon. As you can imagine, their arrival just brings everything to a screeching halt and sets the stage for a showdown that would spread way beyond these 4 walls.
You can hear the church's preacher trying to de-escalate things, trying to steer the focus back to why everyone was there in the first place. He just says simply, "We're here to worship Jesus." He's really trying to reclaim that space for its intended purpose. And this is where you really see the clash of worldviews. Don Lemon responds directly to the preacher, and he challenges him with this question. Don't you think Jesus would be understanding? He's basically framing the protest as a moral imperative, and that single exchange, that became the absolute centerpiece of the clip that went viral. On to Section 2, the fallout. Because this confrontation, well, it didn't just end when the cameras were turned off. It immediately ignited this fierce debate about the line between protest and religious freedom, and it kicked up some very serious legal questions and a huge public reaction. This whole thing set up a classic legal showdown. See, on one side, you've got something called the FACE Act. That's a federal law designed specifically to protect people's right to worship without being obstructed. But on the other side, you have the First Amendment, which of course protects freedom of speech and the right to protest. So suddenly you have this legal tightrope that authorities have to figure out how to walk.
The fallout led to immediate calls for a federal investigation. Now, according to the source, the Trump administration's Civil Rights Division started looking into the case, and the analysis at the time suggested that maybe prosecuting a big name like Don Lemon could be a strategic move, to send a message and deter similar protests down the road.
So the big question is, why was Don Lemon even there? Well, the source material offers some speculation. It suggests that after leaving CNN, Lemon is basically looking for his next big thing, and that he's drawn to these kinds of conflicts that have the potential to go viral. And from that point of view, this incident fit the bill perfectly. Okay, Section 3, the superstar intervention. And viral it did become, thanks to a completely unexpected player jumping into the fray. Nicki Minaj brought her massive, global audience into this conversation. And that changed everything.
See, Minaj didn't just fire off a quick tweet. She posted this really powerful image from inside the church, and it shows parents trying to comfort their children who look absolutely terrified. And her caption was just those 3 simple words, "The world is watching." With that one post, she completely reframed the whole debate, shifting the focus onto the families who are caught right in the middle of it all.
The source material really flags this as a significant moment, calling it bucking the trend. It points out that for a lot of people in the entertainment world, openly supporting religion could be seen as, career suicide. So for a superstar of her level to take such a public and clear stand, that was seen as incredibly rare and incredibly powerful. All right, Section 4, the bigger picture. Because this one protest didn't just stay a local story. The source connects it directly to the supercharged political atmosphere around the midterm elections, framing it as a flashpoint in a much larger national debate. And here's the crucial context. This protest didn't just happen in a vacuum. The source points to polling that shows just how deeply divided the country is on immigration. For instance, one poll shows 2/3 of Republicans support mass deportations. But then another poll on a totally separate incident found that more than half the country thought an ICE agent went too far. It just shows these 2 deeply conflicting views on enforcement, and that's the powder keg this protest landed in.
Which brings us to the key political question the source raises. Does the imagery of chaos that comes from protests like this actually motivate voters? And if so, who does it help? Which party benefits when people see these images and then head to the polls? The consensus from the analysis seems to be that the answer is really not clear at all.
Okay, Section 5, the local angle. Because while this thing has national implications, the source brings the story right back home to Minnesota and directs some really sharp criticism at the state's governor, Tim Walz, for his own words on the issue.
So the source highlights this specific quote from Governor Walz, where he's accusing his political opponents of potentially targeting midnight mass services. The commentators jumped all over the irony here, pointing out that he said this at the same time a church service was being actively disrupted in his very own state.
And the source's criticism of the governor was pretty harsh. He was accused of projection, blaming his opponents for the very things his political allies were doing. He was also connected to a whole separate massive fraud scandal in the state, which led the commentators to conclude that, best case scenario, he just comes across as hopelessly inept.
And all of that leaves us with this final thought. You have a single confrontation in a church that spirals into a national debate about legal rights, celebrity power, and election politics. It really raises a crucial question for our time. In a world where literally anything can go viral in an instant, who's ultimately held accountable for the fallout? Is it the protesters on the ground, the media figures who amplify the story, or the politicians who set the stage? That's the big conversation this one incident leaves behind.